All right, well, thank you all for joining me. My name is Brittany Aker. I work at Palantir.net. We're based out of Chicago. I live in the Chicagoland area, so it's my first time to Denver. It's really beautiful and not as hot. So far, so good. Today we're going to talk a bit about authenticity is contagious. For Palantir, I do client success and sales. So we're going to talk about it kind of from the lens of me as an individual, and then also me in that capacity, or us in that capacity, and how to kind of bring more authenticity back to the conversations and interactions that we have with ourselves and with our clients. So in January of this year, me and my husband welcomed twin boys. That's Xavier and Jackson. Thank you for awing. They came hurtling into the world in more ways than one, and we were just thrust into all the new parent things. He's our first, our only, and it was great. My husband went back to work after 3 days, America, but I was home and my mom came and helped. Thank goodness for moms. And so we just had a blast. I mean, it was sleep deprivation, it was poopy diapers and lots of vomit and 2 babies crying at the same time. But we got to take little photo shoots with them. They were so tiny. And so they got to look like this. And I looked quite a bit more like this lovely lady here, inside and out, right? My body was a mess. My mind was a mess. But this is parenthood, right? I mean, my husband affectionately call it the beautiful awful now. So that's held true even as they're larger. Those pictures were from earlier this year, but they're about 6-7 months now. So they're chunkier and louder. So a little bit better, a little bit worse. But it was with this inside and out that I went back to the workplace. And though I really was ready. I missed the mental challenges, the feeling in my element that work gives you when you like your job. But inside, I was still very much this person. But I went back to work. I dove straight back in, client calls, meetings, all those things. And it was feeling like this that I went back to like my first client call in the very first week. There was very little preamble getting me back into the status quo of the workplace. And I had a client feedback session. That's something that we do. It's something where we want to keep our pulse or check the pulse of our client relationship, see how we're doing, making sure we're still adding value. And just as important, see if there are ways that we can improve that relationship. So they're often fun conversations, but they're serious conversations. And I was ready. I woke up early. I washed my face. I put on a little makeup because postpartum Brittany was always a little green. I don't know what that was. And I got on the call and I was killing it. I was laughing when I should. I was smiling when I should. I was making small talk. And I don't know, some way about halfway through, my brain just, I don't know, fell off a cliff. And suddenly I couldn't understand what she was saying. It was like she was, I don't know, wading through pudding, or I was wading through pudding, or I even compare it to, remember how all the adults sounded in the Peanuts cartoons? Like, wah, wah, wah. And I'm looking at her and she's looking at me. And at some point she stops talking. Maybe she asked a question. Maybe she didn't, I don't know, assumed we were having a conversation, and I had nothing. So I had 2 options. I could try to quickly rebuild the scaffolding of like the traditional professional suit of armor that we've all learned to build since, when did I start work? 13, right? Or I could let it go. I'm gonna be honest with you, I didn't have much of a choice at the time. I let it go. Here's what we're learning. Traditional professionalism is having a negative impact on the way that we're doing business. So let's talk a little about that. Traditional professionalism and its effects on us today. So let's talk a little bit about the definition of professionalism. This comes from the Encyclopedia Britannica. It says that professionalism was characterized as collegial, cooperative, and mutually supportive. It's actually not half bad, right? Professionalism was created in the 1800s in Western Europe and America, of course, not all surprising. It wasn't perfect. This version did assume some things that weren't as great as what I have listed here. Things like that your education guaranteed your competence. We know that's not true. We also know that's hugely exclusionary, but we weren't having inclusive conversations in the 1800s, so we'll give them a little bit of slack. By and large, though, this definition really served the communities that it was created for. By the 70s and 80s, so this was not long ago, 1970s, 1980s, the definition of professionalism started to change and become quite a bit more sinister, as quite a few things did during the 70s and 80s in America. But let's look at the differences between then and then what came later. So in the 1800s versus the 1970s. So in the 1800s, professionalism was seen, as we said, as collegial, cooperative, and mutually supportive. And in the 70s and 80s, it mainly became a tool of dominance and control. Back to the 1800s, it was constructed from within, which means that it was practitioner-led. If we apply that to the way that we work today, that would mean that our devs decide what professionalism is for their devs. Our project managers decide what professionalism is for the project managers. It was practitioner-led. In the 70s, it started, that was taken from those teams, and it was started to be constructed from above. So by managers, by supervisors, by business owners. The next thing was that in the 1800s, it was supremely beneficial for the worker and the client because it was built on trust in that particular expertise that the practitioners held. And it was built on the identity that they had created for themselves. In contrast, we started in the 70s and 80s to see that limits were put on that discretion. Limits were put on the ability for practitioners to create that identity for themselves. And instead, it really mostly became about the bottom line. And as we know, when things mostly become about the bottom line, we lose a lot of the good stuff. And what that eventually led to it created a lack of connection. I do want to focus a little bit more about the benefits of practitioner-led professionalism. When constructed from within, the benefits end up being really substantial. The group, the occupational group that constructed it, they construct their own identity. It actually enhances the image of that group for themselves, but as well as the people that are perceiving them. So imagine what that does for trust and enablement and creativity within those working groups. When we see that these things are constructed by managers or business leaders, what we see is it usually rings a bit false. And it's often used as a means to control the group beneath them. Organizational objectives end up defining the way that they work with clients instead of the working groups themselves. They also set, they being organizational objectives, they also end up setting achievement targets, performance indicators, and those are not as good as the agreements that working groups and clients come to themselves. Organizational objectives replace the control that the practitioners had with their work that they do with the clients in their interactions. It limits their ability to exercise the discretion that they were able to before, and it undermines our ability to serve from our places of expertise. And that is very important to the work that we do and the kind of investment that our clients are making. Let's talk about a few of the unspoken rules of modern professionalism. So this list is by no means prescriptive. There's a million of them, but we're gonna start small. So the first thing is everything is awesome. It's a Lego movie reference. It excites me, maybe not anybody else, but everything is awesome. So everything is awesome all the time. The notion of this is that we're all at work pretending that everything is awesome at the time, because it by no means is. We're all unwillingly willingly participating in kind of like this group theater project. The next thing is that we should be showing no emotion in the workplace. There are no problems in the workplace. We have no life outside the workplace. We only exist as like the person that shows up. Nothing else matters. There's so many other things that go into this. This doesn't even talk about the impact that things like this have on people of global majority. It doesn't talk about the impact that it had on women when they initially entered the workplace. But these are the unspoken rules that we're all kind of still living by. So the unintended consequences of these rules. So a lack of connection, And that is not just with our clients, but also with each other in our project teams, with our superiors, with anyone that we're coming into contact with when we're in this modus and we're in this mode. Project team burnout, that's supremely important in this day and age. Lack of psychological safety on our teams. If we cannot show emotion, if we cannot show that we're human, how do we feel safe to have difficult conversations? No space for errors or being human. You can't speak candidly to your clients, to your colleagues, to your managers, to yourself. You can't we lose the ability to be open and honest. And then also experiments become risky business, and most businesses are not in the business of being risky. So we lose out a lot on innovation in that way. So in essence, we were erecting walls between ourselves and everyone. And that left us all feeling quite a bit disconnected from our clients and from ourselves. And this is particularly damaging because we spend so much of our lives in the workplace. So I say that the days of emotionless professionalism they're in our rearview mirror. We're starting to see a shift, and hopefully we're getting closer and closer to that initial list being a thing of the past. The good news is that attracting our ideal clients and building long-lasting relationships these days consists of open and honest and authentic communication. And we know that these things will attract the same in others. So we were essentially already seeing a shedding of these personas before COVID, but COVID hurtled us light years into the future. Suddenly there were babies crying in the background. Kids were at home and not at school. Our spouses were sitting across the table from us, also working from home. Dogs were barking. There were just so many things we couldn't control, and we all let it go. But what we also learned is the world did not fall apart. It fell apart a little bit, but not because of the reasons that they taught us when we entered the workforce. Wearing shorts or wearing t-shirts or not wearing makeup and not wearing heels, those are not the reasons the world were falling apart. What we learned is that even without those things, or even with those things, we were still capable of doing our jobs. Shocker. And what we've seen since then is some of it's come back, and particularly certain sectors that require it, but a lot of it we've seen is a thing of the past. Because we saw that the world did not fall apart because of this is what we realized. Traditional professionalism is a weight that we are all tired of carrying. Despite everything that we were told, like I said, business did not end, businesses did not fail. Instead, we found a new reality where we were finally able to be seen as ourselves, as humans, and as I said, as capable humans. And we found that the answer to the disconnection that we were often feeling and unknowingly perpetuating was to kind of start letting go or shedding all of the rules that aren't applying anymore. So the answer to that disconnection is authenticity. It's time to bring ourselves back to the workplace. So what I say, it's time to bring our authentic selves back to our workplace interactions. And then we need to ask ourselves, how can we authentically lead better and deeper client relationships? How can we layer emotion as a tool and emotional response to build better rapport and trust with our clients and within our working teams? So let's talk about authenticity and emotion as tools for change. This is a Brené Brown quote from her book, Daring Greatly, which I love a lot. And if you haven't read it, you should. Her quote specifically talks about vulnerability, but for this, we're going to use the word authenticity. And she says, authenticity is not weakness. It is willingness to own and engage with our authenticity. And authenticity determines the depth of our courage and the clarity of our purpose. So authenticity begets authenticity. Our being honest and being ourselves invites our counterparts to do the same. This is a bit of a chicken and an egg thing. I know that sometimes we want to feel safe in order to be ourselves, but someone has to go first. So the next thing is our business personas can be closer to our truer selves than ever before. And that's a direct result of this shedding of these traditional personas, work personas that we built. So we have to let go of these things that we were taught about being professionals. We have to learn to harness our emotions and our emotional reactions for the good of our project teams and of our projects. We should learn to be a little bit brave, maybe practice some small bite-sized experiments until we feel safer and safer doing this in the workplace. And we'll talk a bit more about that. COVID may have pushed us really far down this road. COVID may have pushed us a little too far at times, but as we re-level set, as we come back to a baseline of what we're all comfortable with and able to do, we can bring so much more of ourselves to the table, and that's what we're endeavoring to do here. So let go of the notion that emotions are for the weak, and buy into the idea that emotion can add a layer of authenticity to our interactions. Emotional response is a layer that can better our communications. So what does that look like? A good example is that we had a client that, let's go back to the beginning and let's talk about where we picked up when I dropped my mask. The world did not implode. I simply said to her, Susan, not her real name. I said, I'm so sorry, my brain just glitched. And I told her I had twins. And so what ended up happening is we had maybe a 5-minute discussion that on the shared parental experience, because she had children herself. And we talked about all the things. We talked about sleep deprivation, which has led to a newfound sugar addiction. We talked about babies being the beautiful awful and loving you, and their happiness being quite literally contingent on you being tired all the time and just barely on this side of sane. But what came out of that was an exhale. So instead of being in this conversation that felt more like an interview, it felt more like a conversation, which is what we always want. And we were able to exhale and be ourselves. And we were able to go on and have a really awesome conversation about the things that we were doing great for them. And just as importantly, about ways that we could shore up that relationship. And so in the moment of us being human, we found connection on multiple levels. And that's what we want. And that's the power of being ourselves and allowing others to do the same. Authenticity and emotional response deepens our connections. It's a what we give, we get type of theory, and it has that humanizing effect. And this is so imperative. Humanizing ourselves is so important because that's quite literally what traditional professionalism tried to take. It tried to strip us of everything that kind of made us individuals and give us something that maybe worked well on paper for the business, but didn't really in real life. It positively impacts the psychological safety. We saw that in my example with Susan. And in turn, that helps us work better as teams. And it actually helps us be more innovative in the work that we do together. So emotion adds color to the way that we see and communicate with each other. Emotion as a tool for good. So what we're talking about is a strategic revealing of emotion and how it can add a much needed layer of color and clarity to our communications. Emotions can often express our thoughts and concerns better than just words. And we know that, right? We know the difference between the way we read a Slack message and the way that we understand when we're on a video with someone, how we can better understand the way that the things that they're trying to communicate. So this is just saying this is exactly why this is true. We're able to see tone, we're able to hear tone, we're able to see emotion, things like that. Genuine emotion is a part of authenticity, and authenticity is integral to the building of a foundation of trust. And give you another example. We had a really great client, multi-year strategic retainer client. So we were working with them a few hundred hours a month, big project. They had some changes inside. Some leadership left, some new ones came, and one of the edicts that they got handed down was to reduce our engagement. That's normal. That happens. Churn happens. Change happens. This in particular was a bit worrying. They were asked to reduce our engagement by over 1/3. The reason this was worrying is because it wasn't as if we were just doing fun things. There were integral parts of their site that we were keeping stable. There were integral things that needed to be done. And we were actually struggling to keep up with the needs and desires that they had before this change came down. So let's talk about the difference between a professional persona that we've been given, right, from the 70s, and the way that we can better handle these things now. So before, we could have tried to reduce prices to get them to stay. which doesn't work because the people that work for them have to be paid, right? We could have tried to sweeten the deal in other ways that we couldn't have really kept up. There's no longevity in that. We could have become obstinate. You have a contract, and you're gonna stay in this contract, hell or high water. None of those things are fun or are going to work to have a healthy and happy ongoing client relationship. So instead, what we did is we approached it with curiosity, and we used emotion as a tool. So the first thing is a well-placed right? Acknowledging that this is a difficult decision and it's a difficult thing to carry out for our stakeholder. I said simply, I would not envy anyone in your position. I'm so sorry that this is happening. Let's talk through how we can support you. And that's the thing. How can we support you in this transition? Keep in mind that me showing up authentically, me showing up and bring a little bit of that emotion and empathy on my sleeve, we don't know where that leads, right? And that's always the goal. We leave them well and happy. We leave a relationship intact. Things come back around. So we approached them and we led with that empathy and emotional response. And then we went in with curiosity and said, do you have the expertise on your team to take over the things that we do for you? The answer was no. We knew that because we wouldn't be there otherwise. Do you have the resources? Do you have the amount of people that can learn this thing? And the answer is no. If our contract's getting cut, chances are lots of things are getting cut. And so we said, you know what? We're concerned about this for these reasons. There were a lot of shoulder slumping. There was some, I'm so sorry. But we're going to go away. We're going to come up with a plan and see how we can best support you in this transition. And what we came back with were 2 options. And we were honest about those as well. Here's option 1 that will get you to your goal. We do not recommend it. This is why these are the things that you will lose. This is the best that we can do with what you would be giving us. The second thing was getting them about halfway. You still lose some things. There's some things that you get now that maybe you won't get, like the relationship won't be as high touch. It can't be. We have to cut somewhere and you need all the dev that you can get. But here's how we can support you in that transition. You decide, and we are here to support whatever decision you make. They went with the lesser of the 2 evils and thanked us for the support. What we saw at the end of that relationship, because eventually it did sunset, not because of us, but because some internal things were happening that were out of all of our control. But we ended up having a send-off party. Every person that worked with us on their side over the past few years, whether they were still a part of the project or not, joined to say bye and how much they appreciated us. And that's the kind of thing that we want. And had we simply sent an email that said, no, you're staying in your contract till the contract's up, if we had simply sent an email that said, tell us how much you want us to cut, we wouldn't have the same response. And that's why the emotional response, it's a layering tool. Does it make everything better? No. But it shows that we are with them, that we're supporting them, and that we're partners in the work that we do. So the consequences of us showing up like never before is that we get to build trust and honesty into the foundation of our relationships. And that's so important. Clients and colleagues don't have to guess at our intentions. When we build that into the foundation, honesty and authenticity, when we make a suggestion, they're not worried about us trying to intentionally sell them a pipe dream. They have learned that we are sincerely looking out for their best interest. Clear communication means less missed opportunities to provide value to our clients. They are more open with their needs because they trust that we are there to genuinely look out for them. And then clients feel seen and safe with us. And really, when a client feels seen and safe, there's no better outcome to that relationship. Project teams that retro with their clients as part of the team, we've seen this in our processes at Palantir. Clients are more satisfied with our engagement. And I do say retro, I want to say retro authentically. The retrospective is so important to our teams, but we know that if we are all in there lying, then it's completely useless. So we really want to go in and being respectful, but we want to be authentic, open, honest with how these engagements are going so that we can iterate on them and make them better in the future. And we will see more satisfaction from our clients. We'll see higher engagement. And And when we feel safe enough to tell them, no, that's a bad idea, that's usually a pretty good indicator that we've built something special. So what does the ability to be authentic in the workplace look like to you? So I'm going to invite a little bit of participation if you all are up for it. I will start. So something that I often, I don't know about often, but something that I talk about is I was raised with the notion that curly hair is unprofessional. So the hair that grows out of my head is unprofessional. And that followed me everywhere. And it wasn't specific to one workplace. It went through several. So what that meant was when I entered the workplace, my hair was straight. When I went looking for a job or when I had a job interview, I straightened my hair. I've had experiences where one, I was up for a promotion and they kept pushing it off. And one day I straightened my hair, completely unrelated. I just had to get my ends clipped. And my boss walked in and said to me, now you look the part. And I got the promotion. So me showing up authentically as myself, and I insist on doing that now, is a huge step for me. This job was the first one that I interviewed with curly hair. And I clearly have not turned back. So would anyone else like to share an example of how they have showed up authentically in the workplace?
I'll share. This was several years ago at a previous job, and I was in charge of sales and account management, and my boss told me I was too casual.
Too casual.
And then, that company doesn't even exist anymore. And I took that as such an opposite gift because, this is a fantastic spot-on presentation.
Thank you.
Exactly what built relationships and trust, and going to meetings with them where they would show up in a suit. These like nonprofits who are wearing like jeans and a t-shirt, not it's like woo. And so I feel like I've just taken that little feedback as okay. Yeah, then I'll just
thank you.
I'll just be casual.
I'll just be casual. Thank you for sharing. Also, that's so subjective. What does casual mean?
I know. Yeah.
What does casual mean? I was also brought up that if I went to job interview, I should wear a skirt. When are we going to stop? when does it stop? Like men, facial hair that grows out of your hair naturally. Why is that not okay? Your hair should be short, not too short. It's ridiculous. Anything else?
Yeah, hey. I don't know if this fits the line. So I have a physical disability. Sometimes when I'm on calls, if I get anxious or upset about something, I have a hard time communicating. Right, so the learning's like in that moment, step back and say, hey, like, I need to like step away for a second. I need to like collect myself. So I'm not like able to control where I'm at.
I love that, Matthew. Thank you. I think differences that we wear on the outside are often gifts and curses, right? But one of the ways that it's a gift is that when you show up in a place and you cannot hide who you are, whether that is with a physical disability, whether that's with body modifications or hot pink hair or anything like that, there is just an inherent understanding of this person is who they are. And they're just here being who they are, but it also gives the person that you're talking to the ability to be who they are. There's like a relaxing. Right. And not that we want anybody to go through adversity just for that benefit, but it's certainly a little an offshoot that happens for us. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Hi.
So you kind of look at it from the other perspective, take the time to see the world from your client's eyes. I work with a lot of nonprofits, so I spend a lot of time trying to go out at least a couple times a month volunteering at the different client sites that I work with, just seeing what they're dealing with. It goes beyond just building a website and understand why is this important. Why are they so emotional about what they're doing in the client meeting? And why, when you're having those difficult conversations about budget and things like that, what is the bottom line here and what are they trying to achieve? And understand that it goes beyond just the work and the dollars that we're putting into it.
Oh, that is so good for so many reasons. First, seeing our engagement through our clients' eyes is the most important thing to building a great relationship. And being able to go out and do that, which I'm sure is not a requirement of your job, shows that you are authentically invested in that relationship, but also in the things that they're invested in. So you're creating these connections that will kind of stand a lot longer, right? I gave this talk at DrupalCamp in April, and I had a fun one where she said she went to her interview in a previous call. It was with a friend on Zoom. So she had a Disney princess's background and she forgot to take it off. She said, so she signed into an interview. She's all, ready with her business persona. And then it opens and she goes, oh my God. She's like, well, we're here now. And what she found was her interviewer was also a Disney adult. And so they made that connection. And the thing is, sometimes we don't know where those connections happen. But if we are doing our best to strip away all of the bits of who we are, because some they has taught us to do that at some point in our lives, we'll miss all of the opportunities to connect. And so we should stop doing that to the best of our ability. Anybody else for everyone? Thank you for sharing. So how this practice, we've already started talking about this, can help us attract and keep our ideal clients. So let's first talk about the privileges of this practice, because there are quite a few. And so we're going to talk about the privilege of practice and the dangers of leading with emotion. So not everyone is safe to be themselves. And that can be cultural, that can be geographical. It can also just be the sector we work in. If we worked for some big banking institution, they're still quite in the past where we're wearing skirt suits and heels and a single strand of pearls. That just kind of is where they are. It is, I don't know how to say that, but that's where they are, right? And so they have to work within that. So we have a privilege in that we are not in those sectors and we have a little bit more freedom to be ourselves. Learning or leading with emotion can be dangerous. So control is imperative. So when we talk about leading with emotion versus using emotion as a tool for good, the difference is when I think of leading with emotion, I can immediately call to mind some examples of some interactions I've either been a part of or just been a witness to that were terrible. Maybe someone lost it, and we're human, we'll give them grace, but it still does not call to mind maybe what we were really trying to accomplish in that conversation. It's really just like, so-and-so really lost it and derailed the conversation. That's not what we're talking about. We are talking about an additive practice, not subtracting from our goals. This is about building genuine connection. So we are not trying to be manipulative. We are not fabricating emotion. We are not creating connection. We are trying to authentically build it between us and who we are dealing with, whether that's clients or project teams. And then we are creating a foundation of trust and sincerity. And we can't do any of that without the things that are happening above on this list. So I said already, this is an additive practice. If we are using emotion as a tool and is taking away from our interactions, we are not doing this right. So we should make sure that we're keeping kind of our ear to the ground on that. Would it be effective if I burst into tears on client calls? No. Have I gotten off a client call and maybe done that in the bathroom? Maybe. But we do not want to detract from the message that we're trying to give or the work that we're trying to do. So we just need to lean in strategically to the sincere emotions and reactions that we have in business settings. And remember that this is the chicken and the egg. If we want to bring authenticity to the table, then we have to be willing to start. So this is a quote from Margaret Heffernan. She's also pretty awesome. She's written some books. She is a tech leader. And this is from, I think it's a TED Talk, but it's definitely on YouTube. It's called Forget the Pecking Order at Work. And she says, what motivates people are the bonds and loyalty and trust they develop between each other. What matters is the mortar, not the bricks. So honing in on our ideal client, we want to think about what attracts our clients to us and what attracts us to them. We want to make authentic communications a pillar of our relationship by modeling that ourselves. And we want to realize that connection tips the scales in our favor and it keeps clients coming back for more. So with Margaret Heffernan's quote, what I think about is our clients are initially attracted to us for our bricks, i.e. the things that we're going to bring to the table regardless. So that could be our street cred, that could be whatever our proposed approach was or our pricing, that we have a good track record of delivering on time, things like that, hitting our KPIs, but we're gonna do that anyway. The connection or the mortar of that is where we really want to take the time to build that in as well. It's just as important. And that's what tips the scale in our favor. So building in authenticity and trust is what is connecting those bricks to build our foundation. A foundation that's just bricks is gonna slide, it's gonna crumble. So both the bricks and the mortar matter. So a foundation of authenticity really benefits everyone involved. So when we show the world who we are, we become more attractive to those that are like us. And that happens in life, in our secular lives, but it also, of course, happens in the workplace. Clients don't know what they don't know, and they know it. And that's why they're hiring us. And this is a position of vulnerability for them, truly. So it can be uncomfortable, and it's quite a leap. So we want to make sure that we are showing them that we are worthy of that. Our showing up authentic and as the humans that we are gives them the license to do the same. And that results in a foundation of trust, and it eases the initial stress that is bound to be a part of these large investments that they're making. Our ability to work as true partners with our clients is predicated on our ability to meet on common ground. So the more that we are being authentic, the better that is. And it says if we are not, then we won't know where that common ground is. So that's the idea of, if we don't say, hey, I'm a Disney adult, we're not going to find that in others. There are lots of clients that want to lord it over their teams. I'm sure that we've all experienced that before. I'm sure that maybe we can call to mind a few that weren't so much fun to work with, and we can think about how that position that they wanted to hold, how did that impact our project? How quickly did we start seeing team members wanting to jump ship and not work with them at all? Or maybe even the client eventually jumped ship because we didn't create a great foundation. So we want to consider all of those things. If we want to behave a certain way, if we want to incorporate authenticity and honesty, how are we laying that foundation so that they will do the same? Or honestly, kick rocks, right? If that's not the type of work that they're trying to do. Again, that is a place of privilege. We do acknowledge that, but that's what we're looking at. If they are not our ideal client, then we should be looking for the ones that are. So I guess the finale is, can you think of an example where you could have used these kind of techniques? As you think of that, I'm going to talk about going back to Susan. I was able to, out of that conversation, those few minutes of connection, going back to having a meaningful, genuine conversation about how we can continue to add value, I wasn't able to take that back to a team. And to an awesome team who we had already laid the foundation of authenticity and honesty and the safety to show emotional responses. And we were able to have a great conversation, about all the things that they were doing really well. And they were doing 95, 98% things completely well. But then we were also able to have a really great conversation about the ways that we could work to better support the client. And the thing is, a better supported client is a better client to work for. So this really benefited everybody that was part of it. Would anybody like to share how are we doing on time? If you can think of a time where this may have benefited you in your work interactions? Someone want to share?
I can share.
Yeah.
So I work for myself, so I just have calls with clients and things, and we have like a 10-year-old son. And I used to whenever you come in the room, I was on a call, I would shoot him up, off the whole thing, looking at it. And now I just kind of ask, but I don't make a big deal about it, and I try to pay them away like it's some type of thing, with the environment.
I love that you shared that. What's so crazy about that is if you think back to the times where you shooed your son away, you were probably being more disruptive than if you just let him do his thing in the corner. That happens to us all the time. It's like, oh my goodness, my dog. And it's like, we can't hear your dog. Noise canceling really works. Like we can't, but you feeling apologetic constantly is like, well, now that's disruptive. So I love that you shared that. Thank you. And then what we've started doing at work, and really it starts from the top, is our CEOs will literally say, hey, y'all, we hop on a call and they'll say, I have tiny interns here today. And that just means you may hear some babble in the background. And that's okay. You know, we're all human, we're parents. It's okay. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else before I move on? I know this is a bit of a heavier one, or it can be. So you feel good? All right. So how can we be the change? And that's just, be the change that we want to see. So essentially, we can make honesty our policy and stop selling pipe dreams. And what I mean by that is laying the foundation of authenticity and honesty starts in your sales cycle. And it starts with not selling things that we're not going to deliver on. It starts with laying a foundation of delivering exactly what we say we will. Next is setting goals and expectations early and often, being quick to change them and to be honest about the why. Our clients should not be surprised by things if we aren't. If we know what's coming, they should know what's coming. And sometimes things happen that are out of our control. It surprises us all. That's okay. It happens. But we should do our utmost to see the calamity and be able to communicate that before it happens. Communicate often. Clients, I just said that. All right. So we can do that if we can help it. And then we should charter together. So that's something that we've seen great success with. If you don't do chartering or haven't done it before, it's kind of coming together and making agreements on this is how we'll work together. And it doesn't have to be super heavy. It can be things like we'll assume positive intent. We will Slack for this reason versus emailing for this reason. The best way to communicate is this way, not this way. And then we make those agreements as a team, so that we're always on the same page. And chartering can happen and re-happen throughout an engagement, especially if it's going for a really long time, or if you're bringing on new team members to the project. We should model the behavior that we want to encourage and give those around us the permission to do the same. So we've talked about that throughout this talk, chicken and the egg. So be the change and give other people the permission and grace and opportunity to do the same. And then this is another one from a point of privilege, but don't work for people that you don't respect. For those of us that work in sales, we know these people at the very beginning of the sales cycle. If they do not align with the morals of our company, if they do not align with the moral compass that we as teams have set forward for ourselves and the work that we want to do, then we should not be entertaining those clients. It will make for a horrible client relationship when there's no even ability to start on a foundation of respect. So we should be looking out for that as well. So we do not have time for this activity, but I will leave it with you as a thought exercise. So let's think about how I usually separate into two. And we say, let's think about scenario one is your client is giving you information that may have a major negative impact on the project. How do you communicate that? And scenario two would be that you have to tell your client that the team is going to miss a deadline. So these are not fun conversations that we have to have probably often, often enough. How good are we at them? How can we layer in our authenticity and our emotions as a tool to better convey empathy and the support that we're providing when these things happen? So I'll close with, we want to practice. That's what we do next, is we look for safe spaces and situations to try this out. Think maybe your favorite clients and try this in small ways. And as we get comfortable and more confident, then we could start easing in small ways to try this with our other larger clients or clients that we're having more difficult time with. So I say here, start small. A liberating structure that I really lean into is 15%. So in any situation, how can I make this 15% better? We're not looking to override the whole thing. That's often way too much to bite off and way too daunting, but just 15%. How can I make this interaction just a little bit better? And that could be something like a check-in question to get the ball rolling. And it could, choose something fun. What color are you today? Or what's the best restaurant you've been to in the last month? So something to get to know each other and start off on a lighter foot. And the last thing is to be a little bit brave. Okay. Thank you so much for coming. I'm going to see if you guys have any questions and we can talk about that. But what I'm also going to do is leave this up here. Your feedback to me is invaluable. So if you scan a QR code here, it'll take you to just a few questions to tell me how awesome I am and how I can and make this a better experience for people coming after you. So I
So awesome.
appreciate all you. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or scenarios you want to talk about? We have just a few minutes. Yes.
So what would you do if, let's say, you build a psychological safety, you build connections, and people understand that they can share, vulnerability, and they can share difficult situations, and you all go together to kind of help each other through this difficult time. So somebody else is pulling the weight, the teammates are supporting each other. And then will be like one person in the team who learns the game and suddenly starts using their emotions by slacking off the work or assignments or this kind of like it's a constant crisis.
Yep.
Like 2 weeks in, it's fine, then another big crisis, and then everybody's pulling the weight. And ultimately, the teammates start actually getting more and more frustrated with it. So it was fine, now it's actually playing on their nerves, now like can you do something about it? But you can't call out the person because technically they're sharing the vulnerability and there is no necessarily no proof that they're actually making it up. It might be really authentic. What do you do in this one?
So that's a very good question. So thank you. And there are kind of two routes we can take. If your organization is hierarchical, probably one of the first things that you do is lean on a superior to have one of those conversations. My organization is not hierarchical. We're self-organizing, so that would not be an option. Part of authenticity is having difficult conversations. It's not always easy. So that could be that the person or persons that are being most affected by that person can go to them and tell them that. And it should be a conversation that is had with grace and with empathy. Emotion as a tool will be imperative in that conversation. But the crux of what you're telling them is that we want to be helpful and support you, but we also need you to hold up your end of our chartering agreement. We've made an agreement to do these things. Sometimes it's a situation where other people would gladly pick up some slack if the person had told them and maybe they're not communicating. So that could be something else you could talk about. If you need additional support, you have to tell us, things like that. If it continues to deteriorate the relationship on the team, then it is really up to what things you have in place in your workplace. I know in ours, we then have another working group that we can go to. We call them pods, that they work directly with those people to give them some coaching, to help give them additional feedback from the team. So they would have received feedback one-on-one. They would have received feedback from their pod. And then if it continues to escalate, maybe we need to explore putting them on a different team. Maybe we're not gelling here, we could gel somewhere else. But I think the most important thing is that a team has to be willing to call each other to the mat. And I think that we see that in our friendships, we see that in our marriages, we see that it's just harder, right, in the workplace. But sometimes we have to dig in. Thank you for that question. Anybody else? Awesome. So this is, I'm saying connect with me. That's my LinkedIn. I love getting messages or questions. Stay in touch. I really appreciate y'all for joining me. Thank you for your feedback. And I hope you have a fantastic rest of DrupalCamp. Thanks. Thank you.